A busy week at the state capitol. Lawmakers discuss some hot topics, everything from the state's constitution to new taxes and abortion. King 5's Drew Mickelson joins us now. So, Drew, what happened on those topics?
Yeah, these are controversial topics, as you're about to hear, to say the least. Two issues that we saw that potentially could have some historic impacts here in the future. First, let's talk about this tax. It was back in 2021 that the state enacted a new tax, a capital gains tax for the state's top investment earners. It was a way to help pay for schools. But critics immediately sued the state over it, saying it's an income tax, which is unconstitutional in Washington. So the state Supreme Court justices heard arguments on that this past Thursday, and one of the attorneys fighting the tax was former State Attorney General Rob McKenna. A ruling from the court is expected in the coming weeks. Now, on to this topic of abortion.
What we considered fixed in the American constellation of democratic values turned out to be very fragile. And we cannot be lulled into thinking that that same thing could not be the case in the state of Washington.
After the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last year, activists and legislators in Washington state decided to pursue a constitutional amendment in the state guaranteeing abortion rights. It has the backing of Governor Jay Inslee and Democrats, but does not likely have the votes to pass. Republicans maintain this amendment is not needed, and Senator Ann Rivers challenged the governor on that point.
You know, political theater aside, I don't see any world in which Washington state changes course on this issue. So I would hope that we could all stop the fear-mongering of women losing the right to choose and move on to issues that are more pressing for the state, like making sure people have adequate health care coverage.
Well, I am a little flummoxed by your question, and I'm trying to say this in a respectful way. What world are you living in? There is a party in our state that wakes up every single morning trying to take away this right from women. And in multiple states, and unfortunately in multiple states, they have done so effectively.
Drew, it sounds like there's quite the stack of bills dealing with traffic safety laws. These are laws that would change some of the rules on the road, right?
Quite a few, yeah. If you drive, you may have to change a thing or two. This will likely impact the youngest drivers in the state, the oldest drivers. Probably more speeding tickets will be issued, more folks will be arrested for drunk driving. The momentum behind all of this are some figures that came out looking at last year's traffic fatalities. 745 people died in traffic crashes across the state last year. It was the highest number since 1990, and more than half involved impairment. Legislators say they are motivated by those who lost loved ones last year.
Safe transportation choices are created and guided by policymakers, engineers, and sometimes by a grieving mother who's lost her son.
Amber's 13-year-old son, Michael, was killed riding his bike in Pierce County last summer. She's hoping lawmakers can come up with new ways to make the roads safer. She's been working with legislators ever since the crash last year. She'd like to see the threshold lowered for drunk drivers. She also likes the idea of putting ticket-generating speed detection cameras in work zones. That's an idea that's been brought up and shot down here before, but maybe not this year.
Now, I tell you, cameras are not something that Republicans normally like to talk about. But by God, we got to do something to protect those workers.
Another bill that could slow the commute for some, prohibiting those right turns on red lights in school zones and near parks and libraries. Legislators know that might be an inconvenience for some, but they do think it would save lives.
I find myself just obsessed with people making right turns on the red light. So what I do is I find myself standing there just to see what they do. And if you watch a person, they'll turn their head to the left and keep the head to the left and keep the head to the left and drift out into the lane.
And we know those traffic bills will come up for debate later on this coming week. So, Drew, what else are you going to be covering in Olympia later on this week?
Well, another busy one. We're at the stage here, somewhat still early, the first third of the session, when all the bills are being introduced and getting their first debates. One bill that we'll be keeping an eye on for sure, a bill that would allow the use of the so-called magic mushrooms as a form of mental health therapy. That could only happen for patients over the age of 21 and under the supervision of a medical professional. So that and many other topics will be talked about here this week.
Thanks so much, Drew. We know you are going to stay on top of it. And by the way, if you want to see all of Drew's coverage from the Capitol, text the word session to the number on your screen. It's 206-448-4545, and we'll send you a link.